NbS Solutions Education Summit. It's actually the second summit that is organized on this topic. Last year we had one in hybrid format. It was both organized in presence in Brussels, but also online last September. So let me guide you through the agenda of today's event. First, we will have some opening remarks by Evelina Ivanova, the coordinator of the NbS Eduworld project. Then we will have a keynote speech from Deirdre Hodson, working for the European Commission. And then the event will be divided into two different sessions. The first session will gather two panel discussions and will focus on learning from different Horizon projects. Horizon, but also Erasmus Plus project, as we have NbS Academy. So we have two blocks of speakers, followed by a break of 15 minutes every time. And then we will have a second session, which will be more a policy workshop organized by our partners, the Public Policy and Management Institute. And here we will reflect and draft some policy recommendations on NbS education. And at the end, we will have 20 minutes to wrap up the discussions. And then we will have some closing remarks by Evelina Ivanova and the next steps presented by Clotilde May, my colleague from ICLE Europe. And then I will let the floor to Evelina Ivanova. She is the coordinator of NbS Eduworld, working for the European SchoolNet. She has more than 10 years of experience in the education sector, both in Asia and in Europe, and is also involved in other European projects such as Cool Schools and NbS Academy. Evelina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Simone, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of NbS Eduworld, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all here today for our second and unfortunately final Nature-Based Solutions Education Summit, which will take place today, as you know, for half of the day. At the summit, we are looking forward to really putting together expert opinions, as well as exchanging knowledge and pathways going forward that will really help with solidifying the topic of nature-based solutions in the education sector. And with us here today, we have different people with different backgrounds and professional profiles, which are all gathered around the idea of caring about the environmental sustainability and anything related to bringing this topic to the education sector to an even bigger extent. Today, at our policy learning session, as well as with the interactive discussions, we look forward to hearing from you. That's why we're all gathered here today, so that really this can be beneficial for all of us going forward for the projects, initiatives, and other work which unites us all. So with that very short introduction, I wish you a very amazing experience at the summit, and really feel free to share everything that you have on your mind, and well, enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelina. I have some slides just to present the NbS Eduworld projects. Maybe you can say very briefly, remind some key elements of the project.
Sure, Simone. So NbS Eduworld is a 3-year project funded by the Horizon Europe program of the European Union. As you can see here on the slides, it's pretty much large scale, and it's not only about the budget, it's also about the scope of the project, because we have the very ambitious goal to actually nurture a society that is NbS literate. And how do we do this? We basically focus on creating a community that facilitates synergies between various groups of stakeholders. The main ones we could divide, of course, in those working in the nature-based solutions field as professionals in that particular field, but also we have the other really large stakeholder group, which is the education group of the project. And what we do is really just bring the two together so that they exchange experience, their expertise, their knowledge, but we also learn from them. What are the needs of each of these groups, so that we can really facilitate the introduction of nature-based solutions into curricula in Europe. How do we do this? One of the ways is, of course, to make sure that this NbS knowledge is available to all. That's also why the resources that we create during the project are with this license that allows for free derivatives, it allows for free use. We really are trying to make everything as accessible as possible. We are building our own repository of resources that includes not only project-related and project-created resources, but also those of other projects and initiatives, which is very important. So we're creating this really big pool of resources available for everyone. In addition to that, we are also bringing together a different variety of stakeholders. So we have nature-based professionals, we have education professionals, we have researchers, we have those working in the formal education sector, but also non-formal. We have, of course, those working in all levels of education, starting from early childhood education, primary, secondary, and higher education. And our goal is to really make sure that nature-based solutions are accessible throughout all levels and all forms of education as well. Now, this is a quick look at our objectives, as you can see here. So more or less, it's focused first and foremost on knowledge, because how can we actually expect people to be caring about the topic if we don't inform them about it? Like, what are nature-based solutions? Why are they important? That needs to start from as early age as possible. For us, that really is from childhood education, because, as you know, children are, well, not to sound corny, but the children are the future, and they really hold the future of all of us in their hands. So as we go along, we try to make sure that we educate everyone, and that goes also for informal education, because we know that a lot of people these days, they learn exactly through informal education. There is a lot of accessibility when it comes to information, and that's something we're also trying to take into account. Important for us is also the digital aspect of education. That goes without saying. In today's modern day and age, we cannot do without it, and we use it to our benefit as well. We actively promote this through all of our initiatives and activities. Community building, as I mentioned, is a very key aspect for us, and we do our best to support the inclusion of everyone in our community, but also that our community joins forces together with other communities, for example, Scientix, the Community for Science Education in Europe. So we don't only focus on nature-based solutions, we understand the interdisciplinarity that is necessary in bringing that to education. Of course, part of that is creating synergies. So that's why we're all gathered here today. This is not just to benefit the project itself, this is really to benefit the community. You all have this amazing opportunity to talk to each other, exchange ideas, and synergize so that your projects can bring forward your work. And of course, if you don't work on projects specifically, that's fine. You are a practitioner, you are a member of a specific community, and so on. Here you see a list of our project partners. We are 16 partners from 13 different countries across Europe, and we all have a different focus area that we work on. That is more or less the gist of it. Simone, back to you so that we can introduce Deirdre as the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelina, for being here and for accepting to do the welcoming remarks. So before I let the floor to our keynote speaker, Deirdre Hodson, I would just like to tell the audience that if you have comments, questions, if you want to react to what is being discussed, presented, feel free to write it anytime during the chat, so that the chat can really flow as the event is going. and we will have some time dedicated for interaction with speakers, but it will come a bit later. And now I would like to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Deirdre Hodson, which is working for the European Commission within the Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. She is coordinator of the European Commission Working Group on Learning for Sustainability. And prior to that, Deirdre Hodson had experiences within the Communications and Employment Department of the European Commission. Many thanks for being here, Deirdre, with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Evelina. Super nice to be here with you this morning. It's a beautiful day here in Brussels, lovely blue sky outside. I'm going to take around 15 minutes of your time to talk you through some of the work that we're doing on sustainability in school education. So I'm sure many of you know that when it comes to education, of course, each of our member states run their own systems. Educational systems look hugely different depending on the setup. Our role then in all of that is certainly not to design curricula or not to tell member states how to run education systems, but we do have a very key support role. We have very intense cooperation between our ministries of education. Our education ministers meet at European level a number of times a year. We have shared goals and targets, and of course we have the support of our Erasmus Plus funding programme. So with the member states, we work together on issues that are seen as very strategically important for them. The digital and the green transitions is, of course, a priority area. So my work has actually focused on both of those areas, so green and digital. And today I'll be talking a bit about sustainability and what you've been doing. So congratulations on your project and for getting this far. We followed it with interest as well over the last few years. So if you could share my slides, Simon, I'll go quickly through them. So yeah, we can go on next. Yeah, so very quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the policy background, the context, some of the barriers and challenges that we're facing to embed sustainability into education in Europe. And then I want to flag some of our actions and resources. At the end, I'm going to share a link to a Padlet, and I've put everything there. So hopefully you'll find something that's of interest, maybe an Erasmus project, maybe a resource. We have a number of resources for teachers as well, research outputs. So don't worry about taking notes, or everything will be shared with you at the end. And I hope there'll be something there that will be of interest and relevance to you in your work. So why learning for sustainability? No surprise to this audience, the vast majority of people in Europe are concerned about the environment and say that protecting the environment is important for them. There's a lot of concern, growing eco-anxiety around the climate crisis, and young people feeling that they want education and training to do more to prepare them to take action, to understand the climate crisis and to take action for sustainability. And there's a feeling that education and training in its largest sense there, we're talking about formal, non-formal and informal, is a key sector to help people both understand and take action. Next, please. So it's also about learning in a changing climate. We've seen obviously extreme weather patterns in Europe, whether it's soaring temperatures, flooding, which have unfortunately disrupted learning and will continue to do so. We've had school closures due to these extreme weathers as well. So next, please. This is a report from the World Bank, which talks about those two sides. So the role of education systems to empower and equip our young people for climate mitigation and adaptation. And also at the same time, changing weather is disrupting learning as well. That's something that we need to act for and make sure that our education systems are adapted for climate change. So next, please. And there's also a link with skills here. I just put this report, the Draghi report from last September. It was a report on the future of European competitiveness, which talks about the skills that we need in Europe now and going into the future. And green skills and awareness and knowledge of sustainability is mentioned in there as a key skill. Entrepreneurship, digital, of course, our STEM skills are vital. And also these transversal skills like communication, teamwork, problem solving. And I think NbS, Learning for Sustainability, can help hone those skills and competences as well. So on the next slide, our colleagues Young and Anthony in the OECD issued a report last year, and this is about green career guidance. So in this report, they show from their research that there's a strong demand from young people to actually work in jobs and careers related to climate and sustainability. Yet at the same time, we have skills gaps in these sectors. So this report is very nice. They give lots of really good examples happening across the OECD countries on green career guidance and helping young people understand that the options and the possibilities that are out there for them. So next, please. You may know about the Union of Skills package, which we adopted here at the European Commission on the 5th of March. So that's a key strategy document to fill those gaps, so to tackle those immediate skills shortages, but also to prepare for future needs as well. If you see the second point there, it's about upskilling and reskilling for both the digital and the green transition. And as part of that package, we have a new strategy on STEM education as well, and that's STEM and all phases and stages of education, starting in the early years right up to adult learning as well. So next, please. So to come from the kind of bigger policy picture to our schools, so I'm sure the audience today will agree with that schools are an amazing place to live and learn sustainability, to take it out of the textbooks really and to see it all around you. I like this picture from our colleagues in UNESCO. A lot of activities happening within, outside the school, bringing in local community. You've got some learning out there in the school gardens as well. So I think it's all about, you know, moving from just the cognitive knowledge maybe in our geography or in our science courses to really making sustainability infused in the school culture and making it part of everyday life. And there's lots of wonderful ways to do that, of course. We'll be showing some examples later on. So as well as learning about environmental sustainability, there's many other benefits in learning for sustainability. We ran a survey of teachers on our website, and just a few figures I pulled out here. Teachers felt that when they learn, they teach their students about sustainability and education for sustainable development. This can also help foster values like responsibility and resilience. It can foster that feeling of community engagement, maybe working with local NGOs in partnership, collaboration, and it can promote discussions around justice, so social justice, climate justice, and equity as well. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity for learning. So next, please. But you know, that's all well and said and well in theory, but in practice, what's happening in our classrooms. So when we talk to teachers, we hear the same issues and barriers come back time and time again. There's a lack of funding for these issues. Often there's an initiative in school and then the funding runs out. It's a short-term project. Teachers are struggling with a very overloaded curricula and a high workload. They have many stresses and strains on their shoulders. We have teacher shortages in almost every country in Europe as well. And teachers often say to us that they're lacking suitable teaching materials and guidance. Often in secondary education, we hear that in particular. And then there's a need to move beyond just one or two teachers who are driving this agenda, but to actually move to a whole institution approach as well. So it looks different all across Europe, but these are some common barriers. So in 2022, on the next slide, please, we adopted the first policy really on learning for sustainability. We worked on it, we led from it here in our schools team, but actually it's a lifelong learning strategy. So it's really about all phases and stages of education. So next slide, please. So what is this document? It's a call to action really for our member states to make sustainability a focus of education policies and programs, to ensure that all our learners have access to climate and sustainability education, to invest in infrastructure, training resources, and to support our teaching workforce, our trainers, to develop their knowledge and skills to teach about the climate crisis and sustainability. Next, please. So we don't mandate how this looks, but we say that there are some common threads in good learning for sustainability. It's about action. It's about taking action. So I think it's very linked to citizenship education. It has to be adapted to local circumstances as well. It's going to look very different depending on where the school is located, whether it's an urban or rural school, what part of Europe it's located in. And then, of course, interdisciplinary. And I think that's at the heart of your work on NbS as well. We feel every subject has a contribution to make, and it's about that lifelong dimension as well. So next, please. It's about supporting our teachers with the right kind of training. It's about empowering our young people to take action as well, and is working in partnership with our wider community. So schools can't go alone on this. It's essential that they team up and work locally. There may be local expertise they can bring in. There may be local resources that they can tap into. They can take the learning outside, go beyond the walls of the school and learn in outdoor spaces located near the school. So there's plenty of opportunities to work in partnership. In our policy document, we really stress the key role for early years learning as well. That's a really important time to kind of build those connections with nature and to build that sense of environmental stewardship as well. And early years are phenomenal at outdoors learning, and it's important to really keep that as part of their DNA, to encourage play and exploration and this sense of wonder and awe that we have in those early years. It's really crucial there. The whole institution approach, so moving beyond 1 or 2 or 3 teachers and educators within an institution to really bring on board the leadership team, and then building sustainability competences, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So you might want to look at our Education and Training Monitor. It's our annual report on education and training, and we featured sustainability learning as a key topic there last year. So if you want to look in there and find your country, you'll have a short description of how sustainability is taught or not, or where it features on curricula. There's widely different approaches, but you know, there was definitely a sense that more needs to be done. We need to go further and faster on this. Often the actions are very sporadic or low impact. Schools are looking for more financial support. The teachers are often left to implement curricula without the right supports given to them. We see gaps in teacher education, particularly in pre-service, so initial teacher education, and then often the gaps between the students' values and belief and their capacity to take action. So they can feel very strongly about these issues, but they're not really sure how to act in their community. So we also designed in 2022 a competence framework, Green Comp, which I hope that many of you are familiar with. We have it translated into all EU languages. What is Green Comp? It describes a set of sustainability competences to help our learners, whatever their age or stage of learning, to think, plan and act with empathy, responsibility and care for the planet. So I won't talk you through all the competences in there. You may be familiar already with the framework, our little bee, and our we used a hive and honey as our metaphors, the flowers. So we have acting for sustainability in there, taking action, an area around values as well, systems thinking, futures literacy as well, embracing complexity in sustainability, critical thinking being an important part there as well. So next slide, please. So you see the different areas in there. We have also learning outcomes. We go into a lot of detail in the report as well. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that, hopefully in your own language. For those of you using our EU languages, you can have a look at the translation in your language as well. So how is it being used? We only launched it in 2022, and it's wonderful to see it being taken up in lots of parts of the education and training system, not just within the EU, but beyond. It's been used to design teacher training programs. It's been used in a university curricula as well. We even have some schools using it as well. So it's wonderful to see when we put a competence framework out there, like we've also done in the digital domain, how the community take it up and use it in many different creative ways. So next, please. Yeah, so we have a community of practice. That's one of the resources I thought you might be interested in. You can drop by the community of practice. You can learn how people are using our competence framework. And we've also done a report of case studies of use cases throughout the education system as well, to give you an idea of how it can be used. So I'll go quickly through the next slides. Simon mentioned our working group on learning for sustainability. So this is to encourage peer learning between countries. We meet about every 6 weeks to 8 weeks, either in person or online. We go on study visits, and there we look at topics which the countries deem as being very important and crucial and where they need some support. So we've looked at areas around tackling eco-anxiety. We've looked at the links between digital and green agendas in education. We've looked at the links with citizenship education. I think we're very keen to take sustainability and ESD and link it to other agendas in education, because we feel it is very linked to, for example, inclusion and well-being. So this is us visiting a school in Ireland, in Kinsale, with a group. So next, please. And we share ideas and experience. So in France, we looked at student engagement. They have a great network of éco-délégués in their schools in France. So we looked at that as a model. In Spain, we looked at greening school buildings. We had cool schools were involved in that one as well. In Portugal, it was the links with taking action, so citizenship education. And Slovenia, we'll look at outdoor pedagogies as well. So it's a great network. It's a community of practice, really. It brings together all of those experts from ministries of education, social partners, NGOs together to exchange experience. So we're very keen to share what we learn in these meetings. We always put together key messages. We always have an input paper for our meetings, and all of those are publicly available. And right now we're working on a compendium. We want to combine all of these in a publication, which we'll launch later in the year. So just to go quickly through my last slides. Yeah, we also, as I said, we commissioned studies and research. I've just flagged a few of these here. We've many available linked to sustainability. We've done a mapping of curricula to see where sustainability is found in primary and secondary education. We've done a study on the green and digital transitions in education as well, teacher education for sustainability. So again, lots of great examples in these studies may be of interest to you in your particular role. So Erasmus, of course, green sustainability is a key priority focus of Erasmus. We fund, of course, Erasmus is known for exchanges, for our student exchange, for exchanges of teachers, but we also have many, many projects in Erasmus as well, linking schools, linking universities, vocational education, adult learning as well. So you'll find many projects there on green education. I've just flagged a couple of examples. So we have Erasmus Plus teacher academies, and we have a number of these that bring together teacher education, faculties, training providers, and a number of the projects work on sustainability. I've just flagged two. We've got EduStat and we've got TAP-TS, and they produce some wonderful, wonderful teaching and learning packages on sustainability. And in fact, both of those projects are using, a bit like your project, Green Comp, as a kind of guiding framework for them as well. So those projects are nearly wrapping up. So those learning and teaching packages are available for you to use. So again, I'll be sharing the links at the end of my presentation. So the European Climate Pact, of course, that's our big outreach on climate education, far more than schools, which is my day today. This is really about, you know, the whole of society, bringing in local groups, community groups. So there's some wonderful resources available from my colleagues in our climate department, an upcoming webinar on citizen science, for example, but they have some wonderful resources in there. In education, on the next slide, we have our Education for Climate community. Again, you may be interested in joining. Maybe you're already a member of that community. That's where we host our Green Comp community. And just to wrap up, we'll be running a webinar ourselves together with Iselin and the PPMI team on the 30th of April on school learning environments for sustainability. And we'll be launching there a toolkit for schools on sustainability. We've plenty of good examples there on greening learning environments, whether it's the indoor or the outdoor spaces as well. So you're more than welcome to come and join us at that webinar. And then just to finish, I put this 5-minute video on the Padlet. Maybe if you have a moment, you could have a look. I was talking a lot about how good sustainability can look in schools, and this is an example of a school in action in Tramore in Ireland. It's a wonderful school, and in this short video, you'll see the students learning outdoors in their outdoor classroom. You'll hear from their great science teacher, Patrick Kirwan. You'll hear from their school leader, and they say, look, it's a journey of sustainability. We're on this journey, but you see how it's infused really into the whole culture of the school and how there's a role for every teacher far beyond the science department, the arts teacher as well, and what every teacher is doing to teach about sustainability from an interdisciplinary perspective as well. So that's just a 5-minute video I thought that you might like to watch. So that's it. I hope that was of use to you. I've talked you through a bit of the work that we're doing here in the team around sustainability, whether it's supporting member states with peer learning, it's research through our Erasmus Plus program as well. So I'll share that link as well in the chat to the Padlet, and feel free to have a look at the resources. And yeah, really looking forward to hearing from you, especially your policy recommendations towards the end of the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deirdre, for your keynote speech, for all this information and all these resources. To the audience, if you have any questions, comments, and so on, please share them in the chat. And after the event, we will also share with you, if every speaker agrees, the different slides. And in the slides, you can, for example, here you can see the contact details of some speakers. So then if you have unanswered questions at the end of the day, you can still share them per email with our speakers. So thanks a lot for taking the time, Deirdre. And to my colleagues that are co-organizing, I see that we are 10 minutes behind, but no worries, because we had anticipated this and we have some buffer time. So for the speakers of the first session, which will focus on learning from different Horizon Europe and also Erasmus Plus funded projects, don't rush your presentations. You can still take the time, and we had some buffer time within the discussion. So here I will welcome you to the first panel discussion, the first session, which is about crafting future-ready learnings across educational levels. And here we will have 3 different speakers, and the moderator for this first panel discussion will be my colleague, Kelly Haid. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simone. Hi, everyone. First of all, a huge thank you to all of our presenters and panelists. So we'll be beginning, as Simone said, with our first panel discussion with 3 fabulous panelists, each bringing expertise in a different stage of education. So Sabiha Göksin-Svak will start us off focused on primary education. And Ms. Svak is an interdisciplinary researcher specializing in social geography and qualitative research at the Center for Biodiversity and Integrative Taxonomy at the University of Hohenheim in Stuttgart. Then we'll shift to secondary education with Chiara Longobardi, who is a project officer at European SchoolNet, where she works on EU-funded initiatives that bridge education, sustainability, and digital innovation. And rounding out the panel with lifelong learning is Dr. Conor Dowling, who is a research fellow in Trinity College Dublin, where he leads the NbS EduWorld research in higher education and is the NbS Task Force lead for education. So please feel free to comment in the chat. We will have time for questions and answers after the panel. And Sabiha, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kelly. But I would like to mention that maybe there's a misunderstanding because my focus will be on higher education. And I think Chiara is going to start with primary education. So I would like to leave the floor to her first.
Oh, my mistake. Thank you so much for the clarification. Chiara, please take it away.
Yes, thank you so much. Another just very small clarification. I will be talking about both primary and secondary, and then we will move on to higher with Sabiha. Thanks, Sabiha. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks to the whole ICLEI team for the introduction and to the wonderful speakers at the beginning. It was all very inspiring. I took some notes to go back to some points. Hopefully, we will manage to connect all the dots. So thank you very much again. My name is Chiara Longobardi. I work as a project officer for educational research and development at European SchoolNet. And today I will walk you through the work of NbS EduWorld in primary and secondary education specifically. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Next. Thanks, perfect. So here is a very short, let's say, summary of what we already heard from Evelina about NbS EduWorld. So just to reiterate some core concepts about this project, we are aiming at creating an inclusive community for NbS education accessible to all. As we heard already before from Evelina, we are reaching out to a wide variety of stakeholders and targets to do so. And this is not only in education, but also in NbS, for example, NbS practitioners, demonstrators. So we have really a wide reach, and we are aiming to create this inclusive community for NbS education by linking to specific frameworks such as the Green Comp that we just heard about from Deirdre and the NbS societal challenge areas, both very important concepts and frameworks for understanding what's the place of NbS, what's the value of NbS in education, what is the benefits of really bringing this into education, and how can it connect to real world challenges, and how can it provide students and teachers with the right tools to really make a change, like in their community. As we just heard from Deirdre, it's not only about acting for sustainability within the school walls, but also outside in the society to solve real world challenges. So without going too far into it, thank you. I am just going to focus on specifically what the project did, what we put out there for primary and secondary educators, whether they are starters in NbS or they are advanced in the topic. So for those educators who are starters, we are talking about teachers and educators with little or no prior knowledge of NbS. We developed these guidelines to help them introduce the topic of NbS in both formal and non-formal education, and also informal. And the goal is indeed for us to promote NbS at all levels of education. And I highlighted here some key points from these guidelines, which are mainly resources. So, for example, the learning scenario template that we created, so the NbS World Learning Scenario Template, which includes GreenComp. It's really based on GreenComp, and it encourages teachers to address these competencies included in the framework, and the MOOC, so a massive open online course for teachers from 2023, which was our first edition, based on a previous edition from the NbS pilot from the European Commission. And here in the slide, I also pitched the 2025 MOOC, even though it was not included in these guidelines for reason of timeline. Of course, it was not developed yet, but it's still relevant for starters educators. So just left it here. I thought it would be useful. And then we launched awards for teachers, encouraging them to participate in campaigns in collaboration with Scientix, the Community for Science Education in Europe, and an initiative of European SchoolNet that we also heard about briefly from Evelina before. So again, many opportunities for educators to get started, right? Like they don't know where to start, and the guidelines provide them with some resources to take inspiration. What else did we include? Also tips on how to make the best out of these resources. So a few suggestions. How can we link these resources among each other? How can we use them in our teaching practices? And also how to organize initiatives, workshops, how to include NbS in STEM clubs, so outside of school, in non-formal education, and so on. And a few examples of indeed how to connect these resources to frameworks, to innovative pedagogies. As we heard before, also very important to mention interdisciplinarity and go beyond traditional boundaries between subjects and so on. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thanks. Then moving forward, we developed guidelines for those educators that instead have some basic knowledge of NbS, but perhaps they were lacking some practical experience. So in this second set of guidelines, we helped these educators to consolidate their knowledge and implement NbS in their teaching practices, and also move beyond. So these guidelines encourage, for example, more whole school approaches, community involvement, innovative teaching methods, and especially how to integrate NbS in non-STEM subjects. So as you can see here, I put another set of few examples, but this is just to pitch the core elements there. There's many more resources and inputs to explore in these guidelines. And here we are more talking about how to leverage continuous professional development opportunities, for example, the NbS of the World Summer School. Again, the MOOCs, how to create your own activities, how to obtain whole school recognition. So NbS of the World launched a recognition program for schools who show their commitment to NbS, and this is called the NbS School Expertise. And this is another resource, another community space to network among teachers, among schools, to demonstrate their participation into the NbS education community. So we also included it in the guidelines, and a few examples of additional resources, so such as the booklet for non-formal education activities, also linked to Green Comp, how to conduct NbS activities through scientific monologues, so going beyond STEM subjects and expanding to, for example, performing arts, and some insights from the other areas of the project, not necessarily based on primary and secondary education, such as insight from the NbS Edu which are the practitioners, the demonstrators of NbS, part of the consortium of NbS Edu World, the gamification part, so the NbS Edu World Hackathon, and many more ways to go beyond traditional, as I said, approaches to teaching NbS. So the guidelines really are a way to encourage educators to bring NbS in school, out of school, in youth centers. We have the example of a partner that is implementing it with NbS ambassadors in youth centers and summer camps, through football clubs, through sports, through performing arts. Really, there's a wide range of activities out there. They are just waiting for NbS to be introduced in them. And we yes, thank you. And we put here just a small range of examples about everything I've been mentioning so far. So this is pretty much our work towards primary and secondary education. Going back to what Deirdre mentioned before, we know that sometimes teachers are constrained by limits of time, of curriculum. They lack proper resources, proper guidance. So we are trying to fill these gaps, give them the necessary resources and practical tips on how to use them. So not only here are the final outputs, but what can you do with them? Who can you reach out to? How can you be in touch with your peers? How can you exchange? And how can you link to the overall umbrella frameworks, which are, for example, the Green Comp, and make sure that your learners are gaining the skills needed for the future, as all the new policy frameworks about learning for sustainability highlight. So this is pretty much my overview. Now I would like to leave you with some open questions. So what comes next after these efforts? These are a couple of questions that we can then reflect upon later on in the Q&As, mostly for the audience to think about how can we leverage policies, how can we make sure that actions such as NbS Edu World support for educators is still leveraged by policy frameworks, and also how can we make sure we are still relevant and in line with key EU skills agendas in the future, and not only in primary and secondary, but also in higher education, as we will hear now from the next speakers. And indeed, I would like to invite Sabiha to tell us more about what is the state of NbS in higher education, and can you tell us a bit more about how is it going in integrating NbS in university contexts? And thank you so much for listening. Looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you, Kira, for such a nice presentation. So to address your question, I would like to mention about our mapping activity that we have done in our NbS project. So we can move on with our next slide. That was mainly, our main focus was to understand current biodiversity and nature-based solutions positioning in Europe. Therefore, we conducted several surveys and interviews, and in today's talk, I want to give some findings from those. Next slide, please. So, but before we go on detail, I want to mention about our NbS project very briefly. NbS is a 3-year project that started in January 2024. And we are 11 organizations from 8 different countries. Our main aim is to mainstream biodiversity and nature-based solutions in higher education, as well as technical vocational education and training. Because as a team, we believe that education enables people to bend the curve for biodiversity loss. Next slide, please. So our first activity was to understand current status and trends in addressing biodiversity loss with NbS. To understand this, we conducted a literature review, which included some online platforms, educational resources, policy documents, as well as governmental reports. And our findings include that most relevant research objectives to nature-based solutions was climate change, biodiversity, agriculture, and forestry. As you can see on the right side in the figure, that most of the articles on nature-based solutions were published related to climate change, which then followed by biodiversity and the least by forestry. We also found that there is a significant funding in Europe for initiatives addressing biodiversity loss through NbS, which we already talked about, for example, NbS EduWorld. And this also shows a growing commitment to this area. We also found rapid increase since 2013 in the number of articles published on NbS. So in my presentation, I will refer nature-based solutions as NbS. But I also want to ask that, what about higher education? So there is a rapid increase in literature, but are those concepts also integrated in higher education or not? To understand this, we assess the presence of NbS and biodiversity in universities and vocational training institutions. Therefore, we conducted survey with 94 experts, as well as interviewed 77 experts who are involved in teaching in universities and technical vocational institutions. Our findings show that according to our survey and interviews, most of the experts that are involved in our study included these concepts in their curricula. And when we asked their motivation to include, they mentioned that they wanted to raise awareness and share their knowledge about these concepts, as well as their personal interest and experience play a major role in teaching these concepts. But we also found other factors at individual, institutional, national, as well as European levels that can influence integration of these concepts in the curriculum. Next slide, please. We also wanted to understand networking and collaboration patterns among higher education institutions. Similar to our first approach, we also conducted survey and interviews, but this time not only with teaching staff, but as well as administrative staff at higher education. Our findings included a very interesting result was collaboration is defined as involving different disciplines with academic but also non-academic partners for most of the survey respondents. And there is a need for educational institutions to adapt system thinking. We also found that there is a need for students to engage in real-world challenges and practical projects. So I think at this point, I also want to refer to our next presenter. But first, of course, thank you very much for your attention. I would also like to thank our project coordinator, Dr. Anne-Catherine Fenda, who is also together with us today, as well as all our consortium members to their collaborative efforts. If you want to learn more about our findings and our surveys and interviews that we have conducted, you can reach out to me. In the next slide, you will also find our social media accounts and website of Enables. So please feel free to connect with us. We are always happy to hear from you. And with this, I would like to conclude my presentation and ask a question to our next presenter, Connor. So I wanted to mention that the results from our survey show that there's a need for students to engage in real-world challenges and practical projects. How do you think the learning units provided by NbS EduWorld project can support this need? Could you please tell us a bit more about these learning units and lifelong learning? Thank you.
Thanks, Milicia. Great presentation. Yeah, like the whole idea of lifelong learning, we heard it in Deirdre's presentation, we heard it again in your presentation, and certainly aligned with our findings as well, that we need practical examples now for people to really engage. We have a lot of theory, we have a lot of papers, but people need to be able to apply that theory in their own context. So what we've done through these learning units is really try to make it usable, applicable, and we've done that through a number of cases with adjoined to all the other theory as well. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in depth now. My name's Connor. Hello, everybody. It's a surprisingly sunny day here in Ireland, which is rare enough, and having everybody in a good mood, I think. So and fantastic to see so many familiar faces on the call. Like, this is just such a fascinating topic. I think it's really, really pressing, and it's great to have such a wide group of people all interested in working on this. Certainly working on the NbS EduWorld project. You know, we've had nearly 2.5 years, or coming up to 3 years anyway, and it's been you've seen that rate of change where from where we started 2.5 years ago to now, the landscape of NbS has changed a lot already, and people's understanding, and people are beginning to apply it in a wide variety of different ways. I'd like to just go back to something that Deirdre said about the kind of the big why of why this is really important, and one of our cases really exemplifies that. So we have 3 cases: an urban, rural, and coastal case. The rural one is actually here in Ireland. It's Offaly. It's a small rural county in Ireland, and they have a big issue where the major employer of the area was involved in peat extraction and burning. So similar to coal, peat is our coal, and that all stopped, obviously. So that transition piece where you had highly educated, highly well-paid people are now out of the job in towards a more sustainable future. We need to bring those people along and provide more careers and jobs for that kind of industry where their skills maybe aren't as relevant anymore. So upskilling people on the one hand as we transition to a more sustainable Europe. And then on the other end, you have the decision makers, the key people who are already in positions of power. We heard how important from Evelina that children are the future, but there's actually a cohort now who are making an awful lot of decisions who mightn't have, touched on NbS before. They mightn't really be familiar with nature-based solutions as part of their own education journey. So we need to provide them with tools to make this stuff really accessible, really applicable, that they can just get it like that. So with that, our learning units are, not going to be a silver bullet by any means, but they're a step in the right direction, I think. And, we've produced, with our team here at NbS EduWorld, we've produced 50 units, which is quite an amount of work. I think there's something there for anybody, whether you're just starting on your NbS journey, to if you're further down the track and you're looking now to really apply it, the theory or core concepts of NbS, you want to develop that as a lecturer, as an engineer, whatever it is. I believe there's something there for anybody. We've made them that they're searchable, that they're really usable, that I'm a lecturer myself. If I was working with my colleagues, and similar to Sevilla, we surveyed and we discussed these with, leaders from across universities, across disciplines. So it's a really multidisciplinary approach, but the idea being that if you're lecturing in computer science, if you're lecturing in English, if you're lecturing in engineering, that you might have your core course that isn't really going to change too much, but maybe you could take 1 or 2 of these units in and layer it into your existing work. So just making it as accessible as possible. On the other end of the spectrum then, if you were looking maybe to create a completely new course, you could take a selection of maybe 10 or 12 of these units of the 50 and pick and choose the ones that are relevant to your area and your country, and then you have a ready to go course. So whatever way you want to use them, they're really flexible. We have sort of the main areas of NbS and indeed higher education being all included, but you can see there just an example. So if you want to go on to after the talks, go onto the NbS EduWorld website, you'll see it under the resources tab, and they'll all come up like this for you. You'll be able to search them, check by type, search by education level, and just really have a flick through of what might be relevant to you. I think there should be something there for anybody. I'd love to talk about them all day long. So if you have any questions, please do follow up. Next slide there, please, Simone. And just to make clear, sometimes certainly when I started all this, like, I'm a lecturer, so I always think of higher education, college, giving a talk to students, and typically undergrads for me. But we deal with the postdoc or the executive education, the postgrads as well. But there's so much more. That's only a small part of the higher education puzzle. So we have our entrepreneurs who are kind of more the other end of the lifelong learning, and then our vocational users. So we really worked very closely with with our tier 1, our demonstrators in the project, because they are kind of local government partners who are working with citizens, working with their own staff, working on the ground, as engineers, as landscapers, to really incorporate NbS into communities. So that vocational piece is absolutely critical in terms of higher education as well. And again, the learning units encompass all three of those areas. Next slide, please. So blurry, unfortunately, but look, there's a lot of work there. Next one might actually show you better what we're doing. So the previous Excel just showed where all the titles are, the themes, the description, the context, who's responsible for it, to get more knowledge. So we had experts designing each of these in their own fields, but basically this gives you the full view. So we've divided it down into those introductory models. So typically our levels are level 6 or 7 is kind of maybe the end of secondary school, start of college level, right up to level 8 and 9. So undergraduate and master's level, in terms of whatever stage you or your students are at coming into this, you'll be able to get an introduction and overview that's applicable to your area. We then go into the ones that my Trinity colleagues and I developed for third level explicitly, looking at how to implement NbS in various different courses. And there's a wide range of sort of everything from health to transforming cities there. So again, really trying to target as many people as we possibly could. We have a great partner called Horizon NUA. So they're really working on the entrepreneurial side of things. So working with nature-based entrepreneurs and enterprises. How do you incorporate NbS into those? Or how do you develop this whole new industry like seaweed farming? How do you do bog restoration? All these different examples that are so pressing for our sustainability journey across Europe is there as well. And then we have the vocational piece. This was largely developed by our partners in PPMI and ICLE, and really engaging with, a huge number of local governments, looking at their core needs, looking at educating their staff and the people they engage with as well. And then really importantly, and this comes back to Sabia's question about how do we make this impactful and practical, I think these cases are really useful. So we've one case for each of those: coastal, urban and rural cases. And then we also did one on seaweed farming and one on SUDS, which play into a few different EU projects. All of the information we gathered for these are outputs of, well, they're primarily based on outputs of EU research projects. So of all the NbS projects, whatever there is now, probably about 70, somebody else can correct me on that. There's about 70 NbS projects that we were looking across and looking at what courses are available to enhance and engage with them. And as was said already, that people don't necessarily call what we're talking about NbS, and they, in some shape or form, often the people we were talking to were using NbS in their courses. They just weren't being explicit about it. And certainly students wouldn't be aware when they're signing up to do a course that that's what they're going to learn about. So you have an issue where if I want to learn about NbS, I wouldn't know where to go. And then when I am on a course that's already teaching NbS, I mightn't necessarily know I'm using the same language as somebody else, certainly from a different part of the European Union. So again, these tools hopefully make that a little bit easier to do. And I think the review view will help that. Our next stages in terms of finishing out the project are testing. So we're going to do, we're going to call them toolkits, but taking a selection of 10 to 12 of these units and making them really specific and applicable to each of our case areas in that urban, rural and coastal setting. And that's it for the units. It's been an absolute pleasure working with my colleagues developing these, and we're really excited to have this great output. And we already actually won a Sustainability Leadership Award for them. So yeah, we're pretty excited about it. I'll finish up there, and I suppose we'll get into the discussion. And thank you all very much for listening. But I suppose just to open it up, Simone, I'm going to plow on. Stop me if I'm not supposed to. But I suppose the first question that I'd have is looking at, we've talked about higher education a little bit there, but how do we sort of teach the teachers, I suppose? How do we integrate teaching with existing teaching practices? And maybe I can ask some of my panelists.
And so to the audience, if you have
the audience,
the audience,
either anybody wants to jump in, they're welcome to.
Yeah, exactly. Write your questions, comments in the chat, and then we will have ICLE colleagues looking for them and bringing them to the panelists.
We do have a couple questions already in our Q&A section. So Maruskova Ludmila asked, what might be the role of life science universities to enhance nature-based education?
Maybe I can try answering this
Great,
question.
I was going to ping
Yeah.
you, Sabiha.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So I think, in my opinion, it's very important that life sciences and the network of life science universities play together and connect with each other to teach NbS. And because in my opinion, I see that human and nature is connected, and life science universities are very important to understand this connection. So I think it's very important that like fields like biodiversity, for example, to conserve biodiversity with NbS, it's important that life science universities take the lead. But of course, as we talk in today, interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity is very important. That's why other universities are also important to include in this collaboration. So I hope I could answer the question, but I see a very important role for life science universities to integrate NbS into their curricula. And maybe summer schools can be organized to enhance the education on NbS together with other universities and TVET organizations.
Thank you.
I
Any
can come in
comments?
there.
Oh, Connor, great.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I think when you think of who the experts in this field are to begin with, I think NbS has developed a long way, but ecology is kind of the basis of where a lot of this started, and bringing that expertise into developing the analysis of the impact of anything we're doing is really important. I think those sort of life science experts would probably be the best placed to do that. Certainly in Trinity College, where I'm based, we have a brand new assistant professor in the business school who's actually an ecologist by training, and it's for that very transdisciplinary piece that she's been put into that place to actually bring different schools together, bring us into other universities in different countries as well, and try and get everybody on the same page. So I think they've a critical role, absolutely.
Great. We do have another question that deals with the mission climate adaptation. Is anyone on the panel familiar with that? I could speak a little bit, but the question is, are the speakers aware of ongoing projects of NbS currently under the umbrella of the mission climate adaptation calls, with demonstrators testing NbS and actively involving citizens and local authorities that could be of interest for education? So I think this is also a question of citizen engagement and kind of bottom-up NbS lifelong learning in a way, but also throughout the life course. So if anyone has a comment on that, that would be interesting to hear your perspective. Chiara?
Kelly, maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have an answer, but maybe I have a suggestion to look for something similar. So I don't personally know under the specific mission climate adaptation, but what has been very useful for me to come to know, actually, to just discover what's going on in the field, was to have a look at the Education for Climate Community by the European Commission, which includes a lot of projects and actions that are going on under different funding programs, and how are those connected to education. So that was very helpful. I'm not sure if I'm really answering the question, but just yeah, food for thought to look for these kind of actions.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also it's just knowing where to find this knowledge, right? And I would also give a plug for NbS EduWorld, because the resources on the website are extensive. So you could even plug that in and see what comes up, and it'll probably lead you to something really interesting and relevant. I think, Simone, do we have time for one more question?
Yes, we have still 5 minutes.
Oh, terrific. Okay, great. So we have another question that I think all of you could answer. Is there any gap in the readiness of the infrastructure for example, school grounds and urban facilities, that hinders educators to embrace this journey?
Yeah, perhaps I can also take that as it's more about school related. For sure there's still a lot of work to do on that side, but NbS Eduworld is trying to tackle this as well. We have a stream of work on infrastructure, and we're trying in the project to convince teachers, to encourage them mostly to go out there and identify spaces where NbS could be of use, not only to the schools but also to the community. And this is of course a big part of what might represent a limit, a constraint for them not to really go forward with implementation, because of course you need a lot of permissions and it's not so easy to just transform a space in a green space, or like to put a garden in the schoolyard. But I think what we have heard from teachers in workshops, webinars we are doing in the NbS School Expertise, so where they send us their best practices to obtain this school recognition, they have done an amazing work to convince and to really advocate for these actions, and in some cases they've been successful. Of course, it's a long journey, it's something that takes time, but there can be results if there is a good connection between the school and the community, which is really the whole point of NbS education and connection to the societal challenges. It has to involve the community, it has to benefit the community, starting from the school or from the educational center, also in non-formal education, the parents' community, the families, and why not involving local authorities, asking to support projects designed by students and learners. And eventually it can be overcome little by little, step by step.
Yeah, Kelly, I might come in there as well. I think Deirdre had that really nice slide with the 5 or so leaves kind of eaten by caterpillars and a little bit autumnal, but it looked really good. But it, they summarize so well the points that are the big blockers. And the 2 for me are going to be budget, show me your budget, show me your values kind of thing. And then the issue of needing champions still in the schools, because it's not a systematic approach to incorporating NbS at secondary or higher ed. You are completely reliant on teachers or lecturers to try and kind of go it alone and take this on. And in kind of the current political landscape, where a lot of funding for maybe climate, even sustainability generally, never mind NbS, is being cut around different parts of the world, it can be challenging and could be easy for us to kind of shy away from it. So we do need people to stand up, which isn't always easy. So I applaud my colleagues who are doing it so well around the place.
And
Great.
thank
Well,
you.
Great. Sorry, Simone.
Yeah. I'm keeping track of time, and we are done now for block 1. Do you want to say a words to conclude and to close this this first panel, Kelly?
I just wanted to thank our panelists and our audience for the great questions. The level of knowledge in this webinar is astounding. So thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure having you.
Thanks a lot,
Okay.
Kelly. And thanks to our
Thank
panelists.
you very much.
Thank
So
you.
now we will have a 15 minutes break. I see that we have about 115 people attending the event. So thanks a lot. Stay with us. Don't escape. And while taking your break, we are sharing with you a small question shared by the NbS project. So what do you think is necessary in higher education to enable societal transformation with nature-based solutions to bend the curve for biodiversity? So the NbS project is working on a deliverable, and your input would be really valuable for Sabiha and for Anne-Catherine, who are working on this project. So while taking the break, you can, if you wish, scan the QR code and answer the question. And I will see you in 15 minutes. So at 10:25. See you. Slowly to come back, to open up your camera again. For those of you who didn't have time to answer the question from our NbS partners and colleagues, we will share the slides anyway, so you will also have time at home if you wish to answer it. Yep. And now I am changing slides. It's 10:25. So time to dive into the second panel session. So first, we talked about the different education levels with primary and secondary, then higher education, and then the lifelong learning. And now with this second panel, we will focus more into the nature-based solutions living labs, and also focusing on the whole education approach, going from theory to practice with 3 other speakers from NbS Eduworld, from Cool Schools, and from NbS Academy. For this block of speakers, it will be my colleague Marcelo Gerlach doing the moderation. So Marcelo, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Simon. Can you hear me well? Yeah.
Yes, very well.
Okay. Yeah, you already almost introduced the speakers. We're having 10 short presentations, 10 minutes each. The second block is called NbS Living Labs as a whole education approach from theory to practice. And we will start with a presentation by EA on the NbS Eduworld Living Labs roadmap from scenario to practice by Talia and Elino Germanicki. Then we will go to a case study, the benefits and recommendations in using nature-based climate shelters at schools as learning environments by Dr. Isabel Ruiz Mayen from Cool Schools. And we will finish with the co-development of new initial teacher education and continuous professional development teacher training programs in NbS Education through Living Labs by Cristina Galani from the NbS Academy. So that said, I will also be looking at the questions in the chat and we can answer them at the end. And the floor is yours, EA, for starting.
Yes, thank you, Marcelo, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Thalia Tsaknia. I'm from Elino Germanicki Agoghi, a partner of the NbS Eduworld, leading the transformation of schools into NbS Living Labs in the framework of NbS Eduworld. And I'm really happy to start this second session and introduce you to one of the pillars of the NbS Eduworld project, the transformation of schools into living labs to support the mainstreaming of NbS in education. Next slide, please. In the framework of our work in NbS Eduworld, we have developed different plausible scenarios for NbS in education, approaches and materials. All this, together with our case studies and the results from the implementation, will lead us to deliver a roadmap for schools as living labs to support the NbS in education. So today I will present and discuss with you some of the above. Next slide. For NbS Eduworld, the students must be able to understand and address the challenges of the 21st century as today and tomorrow citizens, and promote environmental sustainability. Thus, their schools must be an innovation hub for the study, application and dissemination of nature-based solutions, and a living lab for knowledge exchange that develops partnerships, co-designs and co-creates NbS with the society. The schools as NbS Living Labs act as places to apply learning methods that promote the development of green competencies and learning buildings for experimentation and problem solving. Next slide, please. Many might wonder why to transform a school into NbS Living Lab. In such an accelerating mode, the benefits are many and they are for all. Everyone in the school community develops key skills, teachers, students, leaders, since education is now linked to an open approach and lifelong learning. The learning opportunities are everywhere, available outside the formal education, and now the boundaries between formal, non-formal and informal are becoming indistinct. Next slide. In addition, education is coming at the heart of society and is becoming integral to local community development, since open schooling activities for nature-based solution can stimulate real scientific work. They are inspired by local needs and problems and address NbS challenges, contributing substantially to the EU Green Deal. Research also highlights that when people are close to nature, they improve their physical and mental health, memory and learning ability, and reduce their stress. Next slide. So, how can we achieve this transformation? By implementing at scale a process that facilitates this transformation of schools to innovative ecosystems, acting as shared sites of learning for which leaders, teachers, students, and the local community share responsibility, over which they share authority, and from which they all benefit through the increase of their community science capital and the development of responsible sustainability citizenship. Additionally, by empowering system-aware people to create a self-sustaining, innovative and open culture in schools, and avoiding the creation of interesting but isolated pockets of experimentation. Also very important, and coming now to the main point of our session, by following a whole school approach. Next slide. The whole school approach encompasses pedagogies, vision, planning and governance, active learner and staff participation, involvement of families, management of buildings and resources, and partnerships with local and wider communities. It answers questions like what we learn, introducing a competence-based curriculum development, how and from whom we learn, as well as where we learn and with whom. Introducing at this point the open schooling context, which is defined by the European Union as the process of engagement and partnership of educational institutions with families and local communities to enhance teaching and learning. So the students are more rooted in their habitat and gain a sense of place and connectedness. In a school as NbS Living Lab, the teaching and learning are interdisciplinary and the approaches are collaborative, experiential, inquiry and problem-based, science-oriented and relevant to local contexts, since much of the learning does not take place inside the classroom, but also in other spaces inside and outside the school, acting thus as a learning building for promoting sustainability as mentioned earlier. The reconstruction of the schoolyards is a comprehensive example of this. Isabel will present the case of cool schools in a while. In an NbS Living Lab school, all educators, whatever their discipline or sector of education, previous slide please, are considered as sustainability educators who need to support their learners in preparing for the green transition. For this reason, they have the expertise and continuous training opportunities to feel sufficiently equipped. Nowadays, Erasmus Teacher Academies provide such opportunities for teachers. Didre mentioned two of them. There are many more providing training and resources for sustainability citizenship, and NbS EduWorld has established synergies with some. Christina will present also later one academy focusing on nature-based solution. Next slide now. The next steps for supporting the implementation of NbS in education from a long-term now perspective is a scenario planning exercise. 3 scenarios were developed in the framework of NbS EduWorld. In the first scenario, innovative schools which already have a vision and effective leadership follow the whole school approach and are transformed into NbS Living Labs, showing thus the way. The schools themselves are the initiators, the designers, and the leaders of the processes. In the second scenario, ministries, directorates, municipalities, and organizations collaborated to develop a stepwise design to scale up nature-based solutions in education, establishing the school as NbS Living Lab. They develop comprehensive frameworks that integrate NbS principles into the curriculum at all educational levels. The transformation comes through policy integration, capacity building, and funding mechanism. In the third scenario, a hybrid situation is presented where individuals, NbS experts in the field, teachers or school principals, and professionals outside the school meet each other or follow an initiative, a policy or framework, and in this way transform schools. Next slide. This last scenario, the third scenario, the crossing path scenario, could be achieved rather early on. Next slide, please. The interventions and changes needed are close to existing approaches. The key challenge appears to be the number of NbS experts and motivated teachers and principals. Please, next. No, previous slide, please. Thank you.
Sorry, Talia.
Yeah, thank you. The second scenario, the flourishing from inside out, is also near term in terms of plausibility. Thus, the intervention and changes needed are focused mainly on the potential activation and efficient collaboration with policymakers in order to offer substantial support. The key challenges, again, seem to be the number of schools that have the vision, effective leadership, and support mechanism, as well as the curriculum in some countries that leave little room for innovative and interdisciplinary approaches. There is a great risk in this scenario of ending up with isolated pockets of innovation, as mentioned earlier, and only a few schools for privileged groups maybe, having access to such an educational model. The open the way from outside in scenario is further out on the time horizon than the two others because it implies significant interventions and changes. There is a need for shift in public policy by establishing new priorities that guide public finance, align them with new mechanisms that offer flexibility and adaptability. Furthermore, the implementation of strategic interventions requires strong collaboration between the public and the private sectors. The key challenge appeared to be the orchestration of policies, the coordination across government levels, and the substantial engagement of all the stakeholders involved, especially the school community. Otherwise, there is again a risk of unsustainability and application of isolated pillars of the whole school approach. At this point, I would like you to think and discuss at the end which scenario of plausible future for NbS in education can lead to more effective and sustainable results from your point of view, and have you experienced one of these scenarios from your role as the teacher, school head, policymaker, or municipality representative? How do you think it could be scaled up? We can discuss this at the end. Next slide, please. Now, key points for any school to consider are to form the vision and invest in that, creating the right conditions. This includes the greening of the curriculum, which means embracing a lifelong learning approach that integrates NbS and sustainability into school curricula, training, teaching materials, pedagogy, and assessment. The role of leadership is something that must also be considered in order to trust and inspire the people, guideline, and coordinate. The adoption of an open culture of extroversion and collaboration with externals, with the involvement of the whole school community in meaningful and coordinated ways in proposing and co-creating approaches to what, how, and where they learn about the green transition and sustainable development is the next step. Finally, the monitoring of the processes and the continuous reflection on the long-term impact are both issues that the schools must be considered through their activities. And coming to close, final slide, please. The NbS EduWorld has developed and will provide materials to support the transformation of schools into NbS Living Labs, such as the action plan that each organization needs to create, as well as community building and training mechanisms tools and resources tailored for each pillar of the whole school approach, like guidelines, methodologies, inspirational case studies from the NbS Eduworld school community, publications, and teaching materials. And with this, I will give the floor to Isabel now, and linking to what I have said, asking her how can the results and insights of Cool Schools serve as an additional resource to support an NbS Living Lab action plan of a school and its implementation regarding specifically the pillar of infrastructure. Thank you for listening, and Isabel, you have the floor.
Thanks, Talia. Great presentation. Well, you will see in my presentation that Cool Schools project findings and specific recommendations on how to co-create nature-based climate adaptive schools will for sure help and support your roadmap, providing inspiration from our case studies, and also because many of the policy recommendations are in line with what you are finding. So I'm going to start. I'm Isabel Ruiz Mayen from the Open University of Catalonia. It's a pleasure to be here. And I will present our results of the Cool Schools project. That is a 3-year research project that finished last month. The next slide, please. That was inspired by previous research on the positive impacts of greening schoolyards. So previous studies have already found that implementing nature-based solutions in school environments increase access to urban nature, enhance children well-being and also physical development during school hours, and also that improve children attention once they come back from a green schoolyard in comparison from coming back with a gray schoolyard. And of course, that these green schoolyards diversify play and avoid conflicts. But we wanted to go further. And as Talia explained, we wanted to focus on the whole school approach, having these schoolyards also as a place where we do learn. That, as Talia explained, is a key dimension of the school, whole school approach. Next slide, please. So we frame our conceptual approach by doing research in these 6 dimensions of the benefits that could be provided by these naturalized and climate adapted schoolyards in terms of children cognitive and behavioral development, the biodiversity conservation at the urban scale, improving accessibility and equity to natural spaces, finding out what were the safety perceptions of these green spaces, and also doing research in inclusive governance and quality education. And we conceptualize these green schoolyards as nature-based climate school shelters because we focus on co-created environments by the school community, but also other actors. And these nature-based school climate shelters should ensure well-being, social equity, learning, and inclusivity regarding school children, other school community members, but also the wider neighborhood community, because many of these green spaces are open to the neighborhood during the weekends. Next slide, please. So we studied 4 cities where these pioneering programs have been implemented, that are Barcelona, Paris, Brussels, and Rotterdam. Next slide, please. And I will show you now some of the key results of these 3 years of research that are, of course, super summarized here because I don't have time to go in depth. So regarding children's development, we found that looking at the relationships between children's exposure to green school environments and their behavior in primary schools in Brussels, that in those schools where there was less green in their schoolyards, behavioral problems were more prevalent, specifically peer relationship and emotional problems. And we also found a relationship with the socioeconomic background of schools. So these problems were more relevant in low socioeconomic school backgrounds, also because these schools were those where there were less green in the schoolyards. In terms of accessibility and equity, we found that in the 4 cities studied, almost all, 93% of primary schools have less than 30% of green and blue infrastructure. And in Brussels, doing a focus in Brussels, we found that children from wealthier families significantly benefit from greener and healthier outdoor school environments, including greener schoolyards. So there is a need to focus on these less privileged neighborhoods. Next slide. In terms of sociocultural perceptions and looking at safety, we use the Green Schoolyard Evaluation Tool, the GSET tool, that allows to quantify the degree of greenness of your schoolyard. That it could be a good tool also, Talia, for the roadmap for the schools. So we see that in Rotterdam, where this tool was tested and implemented, the presence of water elements and habitat for animals were less represented, indicating that this could invoke some form of perceived reduced safety, but are also important for the learning and playing of children. Also, regarding biodiversity practices, we found that in the 4 cities, the schoolyard greening fosters biodiversity and human-nature interactions in urban settings, that these green schoolyards enhance biodiversity of the city and inspire life-focused teaching practices, but also that these effective biodiversity management practices requires governance shifts at the school level, cultural adaptation from the school community, and also community effort. So allowing that other actors beyond the school could also participate in management, because as you know, schools used to be closed in summer, and it's important that someone takes care of them. So next slide, please. Last but not least, regarding the governance transformations, we found that one of the key issues for ensuring an effective and vigorous schoolyard governance is that these nature-based interventions are integrated into the pedagogical philosophies and practices of the school, or also that these green schoolyards even transform these pedagogical practices. The quality of stakeholders' engagement during the process is also key, and we should take care of doing it in an inclusive way. So allowing that all actors could participate, and especially children that are very involved in a consultancy way, but then their ideas used to keep aside at the end. Then it's important also to dedicate sufficient time for green schoolyard design to strengthen inclusivity and adaptability. And sometimes this catalog approach, so having elements, predetermined elements to include in the schoolyard transformation is good in terms of efficiency, but it might bar diversity, creativity, and eventual participation. Next slide, please. So with all these learnings, we made 2 policy briefs, one for urban planners and policymakers on the design, implementation, and rollout of nature-based and climate-adaptive schoolyards. These are the main 4 recommendations: establish an holistic vision grounded in sustainability values, embed nature-based schoolyards in public policies, programs, plans as a cross-cutting issue. So not just in education, not just in urban planning, but also in health, programs, in security programs at the urban city, social care, etc. Actively engages the school community in the preparation, implementation, and maintenance of the nature-based school year. Otherwise, the long-term perspective will not be implemented, and also monitor and take care of the evolution of this nature-based school year, because it's a live project, as also Talia said. Next slide, please. Also, our colleagues from the European SchoolNet developed this policy brief for ministries of education. And the main policy recommendations are that should be a curriculum reform for the inclusion of green education. Continuous professional development should be recognized. Also, improving access to resources and tools and endorsed repositories and include it in national resources, and provide guidance for schools and encourage green transformations and collaborations. And the final one, please. So we produce also different educational resources, a MOOC on nature-based climate shelters in a school for empowering teachers, that is already available at the European SchoolNet website and also at the project website, guidelines for schools to turn your school year into a nature-based climate shelters, and another educational resources and publications that you can access at our website, coolschools.eu. So thanks a lot, and I have now a question for Christina. How is NbS Academy co-creating these CPD teacher training programs in NbS Education? Thanks, Christina.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased and honored that I'm here and I have been invited to present NbS Academy and our work and contribution to NbS Education. I'm project manager and researcher at Stimuli for Social Change. Stimuli is the coordinator of NbS Academy, but we can move to the next slide. Okay, today the main topic of my presentation regards our work to the co-creation of new and innovative initial teacher education and continuous professional development teacher training courses and programs in NbS Education through the Living Labs methodology. Next slide, please. So, some core elements of NbS Academy. NbS Academy is an Erasmus Plus Teacher Academies program. Its duration is 3 years. We have 1 year more. We are 7 countries, 9 full partners. We have 13 associated partners, and our main aim is to create a European professional learning network, a community of practice around Europe on NbS education by bringing together teachers, teacher trainers, policymakers, and NbS experts and citizens, facilitating in this way the creation and establishment of collaborative learning communities through different pathways, such as networking opportunities, knowledge sharing, open innovation activities, and of course, co-creation, knowledge sharing. All these activities and elements are culminated into 2 joint training courses. So, next slide, please. Here you can see the geographical allocation of our consortium. As I said, we are 9 full partners, but we have 6 pilot regions, 1 in Greece, 1 in Sweden, 1 in Germany, in Austria, in Bulgaria, and in Cyprus. Next slide, please. Here you can see the methodology that we have followed in order to develop, first of all, the community and networking mechanisms to build this professional learning network under Work Package 2. In the following phase, in phase 2, we have explored the needs of teacher trainers because they are core part of teachers' capacity building and professional learning opportunities and skills development. So we have explored teacher trainers' needs, and in this way, through some research activities, dedicated survey 1 year ago, we developed training materials, and we have tested through a boot camp last summer this material with teacher trainers. Of course, in phase 3 under work package 4, we have established local living labs, where the main aim was to explore and discuss and reflect together with teachers in these 6 pilot countries I mentioned, their needs, their level of experience, their preferences on how they need to be trained in NbS education, because many teachers, we observe that many teachers lack these training opportunities. They don't know how to even to collaborate with NbS practitioners, how to connect with the NbS community, and how to transfer this innovation into their settings. Today I will continue with the next phase, where I will describe you what we have been developing and how we will test these joint training courses. So next slide, please. Here you can see just a brief overview. You can see our achievements and results in the first phase of the project. Before establishing our local living labs, we developed some core deliverables that inform our work and research findings. We have developed a roadmap, an NbS Academy roadmap and network. Next, we have developed, of course, an NbS education framework, which is a theory-based and competence-based educational framework. This framework offers guidance also on the pedagogical approaches that are needed and should be integrated into teacher training programs. And as I mentioned previously, we have developed the Train the Trainer program by implementing last summer a bootcamp and an online intensive training with teachers. And of course, we have launched our living labs. And next slide, please. Okay, the main question for today, how the living labs methodology is leveraged in our project. The living labs is applied in NbS Academy as a pathway, as a tool to develop these new training programs through different modules for pre-service and in-service teachers. These are the core target groups of our 2 European joint training courses. Of course, these joint training courses are accompanied with rich online and offline resources. I will explain you in a while how we will test our joint training courses. And as you can see on the right, I am mentioning in this slide the title of modules. Each of 2 joint training courses includes 6 modules in different topics. We start with an introduction to NbS Education and NbS Solutions, and we continue with the designing process and implementation of NbS in schools. We have developed a series of lesson plans in different topics, as you can see on the second column of the table on the right. And of course, a core part of our joint training courses involves some strategies and measures and activities that can help teachers, pre-service and in-service teachers, reflect on and collaborate on future directions and on how they can upscale already existing activities but also bring innovation into their own settings in different topics. We have divided based on the findings of the first meetings in our local living labs. We observe that some key topics are critical and are most preferred for teachers. So we decided as consortium to pay attention to a variety of topics in these courses, and these courses are being finalized next month. So next slide, please. Okay, here you can see on the left a basic structure on how we envision the content of our joint training courses. As I mentioned previously, we pay attention on familiarize teachers with some introductory materials on NbS education, combined with experiential learning and competence-based activities. And of course, the reflection is critical at the end of the module. And the reflection activities are also included in our lesson plans, which is, in any case, a separate module in our joint training courses. These co-developed joint training courses on NbS teacher education will be tested and evaluated at local level through local living labs and are already currently being tested through local living labs, but also at international level. We are in the process of establishing an internationalization lab in the same work package, where we will apply both physical and digital mobility schemes. The physical mobility will be applied in the form of a summer school that we will implement the upcoming July, and we are in the process of organizing this summer school because it is a core part of testing with teachers from our 6 pilot countries, our modules. And in this way, we will promote collaborative learning and enhance multilingualism, and at the end of the day, promoting the European dimension of teacher education. Because we will bring together these teachers with different backgrounds, different level of experience, both in NbS, but also in education for environmental sustainability and all these important topics. And the second part regards a digital mobility element, where we will help and support teachers being exposed in virtual NbS demonstrator sites through different activities, NbS activities around Europe. So we will bring together all these elements. We will enhance collaborative learning, and we will develop and cultivate green and digital skills of teachers, pre-service and in-service teachers. Next slide, please. Some key needs and challenges that we have observed through the first 2 meetings of our local living labs. I will start with the needs of teachers. Here is a summary that implies that teachers need actionable, context-specific solutions that can be implemented within their educational settings. They need networking opportunities. They need partnerships with local community and NbS practitioners. Of course, the element of engagement, active engagement with upskilling and reskilling opportunities and practices on green skill is another important dimension from needs analysis from our local living labs. And of course, teachers supported that they need to be more aware of the basic NbS principles, and they need concrete examples and concepts that through which they can link NbS to their curricula, because we know that there are differences from one country to another, so they need this link of concrete examples to embed them in their curricula. And some challenges, of course, there are some limited training opportunities, especially for non-science teachers who are at most times are not so familiar with this topic and with the technical expertise and application of NbS solutions in green and in school environments. And of course, there is a lack of familiarity with NbS resources, as I mentioned previously, in the part of needs, and limited funding and some logistical institutional barriers that most times hinder systematic implementation and application and upscaling of NbS in school.
Thanks, Christina.
Slide.
I think we have to
Yes.
slowly come to an end if we have to have 10 more minutes.
Yes, of course.
But this was an amazing presentation. Do you want to finish, say one last thing?
Yes, there is a question, a general question that I mentioned here. In your opinion, from what you heard today from me about NbS Academy, what are the most important elements of NbS Academy joint training courses that you think that can strengthen future teacher professional learning and skills in order to integrate NbS education in standardized and formalized initial teacher education and continuous professional development programs? This is the core question that I would like to highlight as reflection. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot to everyone, to you, Christina, but also to Talia and to Isabel for these great presentations. Before we jump into Christina's questions, we also have 2 questions from the audience so far, but also to the audience, please use the Q&A for writing up your questions so we can have a little bit discussion around 10 minutes we have now. Maybe the first question to Talia was, what is the role of parents in school living labs? Can parents be part of school living labs, and what is the integration of it? Maybe we can start with that, and then we jump into the rest of the questions. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Marcelo. Of course, parents, as mentioned, are a core an important part of the school as living labs. Following the open schooling approach and as defined by the European Union, the open schooling is an approach that integrates and involve the parents, the professionals, the local community of the school in the interventions and in the educational process. So yes, of course, the answer is for sure they are a core part of the living lab methodology.
Great, thanks a lot. And to you, Isabel, there was a question on the location of the climate shelters, because some of the schools don't have space within the school grounds, but there are spaces in the local community. So is it necessary that these climate shelters are in the schools, or how is the interaction maybe with the community, the local community, or the spaces around the schools beyond the school ground? Yeah, maybe you can talk on that a little bit.
Yes, of course. Yeah, very interesting question. For sure, the climate shelter could be outside. We have faced this situation in Barcelona and Paris that are very dense cities, so the schoolyards are very reduced, and sometimes, especially here in Barcelona, there is a, let's say, kind of conflict between the use for sports that requires a paved area, gray area, and the use for other activities where you can do a very consistent transformation into a green schoolyard. So some schools have found a solution by expanding their limits beyond the school walls, and going to the street and greening the street next to the school, or having some collaboration with urban gardens that are very close there, And of course, the idea is that these nature-based climate shelters could be used by the rest of the community members, and also that the schools could use other nature-based climate shelters near the school. So yes, it can be done. And we have some examples in cool schools.
Thanks, Isabel. And now maybe we can jump also with a question Cristina was doing to the audience, so we could interact with you, the audience. What are the most important elements of NbS Academy, joint training courses that can further strengthen future teachers' professional learning and skills and integrate NbS education, formalize and standardize ITE and CPD programs? Anyone from the audience that wants to talk about this, what elements of a joint training courses can further future teachers' professional learning skills? So we're talking about learning skills of teachers. Any comments or questions from the audience on this topic? I'm not sure. You can always use the Q&A chat. There is two chats, the chat and the Q&A. So for questions, it's better to use the Q&A one. Ah, yeah, something incoming. And Kathleen is saying, at least me, I unfortunately cannot put anything into the chat. Ah, yeah. But you can put things into the Q&A, right? So you can always ask questions in the Q&A.
Also, maybe while people are writing in the Q&A, I can add a testimony about the Paris case. I know in cool schools you work with Paris, and I'm Parisian myself, and so I could see like how the shelters interact with the schools when it's not only the action of greening the schoolyards, when it goes beyond the schoolyard itself. They have also gave back to pedestrians the streets where the schools are located, and they have also like put a lot of greening of vegetation, and it's really amazing to see the difference between what we had before and these really beautiful streets with also like some games that you have on the ground, and so kids now can also play outside the school and in their streets. So that's I can testify about that, and it's really great. And maybe now we have more elements into the Q&A.
Yeah, someone is talking about the engagement with local governments to support the maintenance of how to intervene in the schoolyards. So I guess it's also addressing this interaction between local community, but beyond local government and schoolyards.
Just to add to this, to the last comment, that the involvement of the local community is important in terms of the funding mechanisms, the technical support. So also in many countries, the local authorities are responsible for the infrastructures of the schools. So following the open schooling approach we earlier mentioned is something that we can see happening. And I want also to highlight something that Isabel mentioned about how all these interventions must and need to be integrated in the pedagogies and the curriculum of the schools. This is important, the most important part, because we have seen examples of interventions coming from the authorities, coming from externals, But if the school community, the teachers and the students don't feel that it's their own responsibility, these interventions, and if they don't collaborate to these interventions, we have seen before that we have this isolated pocket of experimentation, as I usually said this, and after years to have abandoned areas. So the integration of each or any intervention we are doing to the school community, to the pedagogy, to the ideas of the school, of the teachers and students is very important.
Thanks, Dalia, for that. And with that, we will go into a break, right, Simon, for the next.
Yes, exactly. We have 15 minutes break. Discussion is done. Yes, and the break will be over at 11:30. So we have still 1 minute of break before slowly coming back together for the workshop on policy recommendations. So this workshop will be led by our partners PPMI, and I will just put this slide, and then I will let you have the floor. Eleonora, Iselin, I don't know who comes first, but yes, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Simone, and thank you to all the speakers from session 1. I think everyone did a great job in giving us a great foundation for the discussion that is to come in session 2. So my name is Eleonora Lakavičiūtė. I work as a senior researcher at PPMI, which is the Public Policy and Management Institute based in Lithuania. And what I mostly do in my work is work on topics of learning for sustainability. So me and my colleagues have been very fortunate in the last 3 years to work on the NbS EduWorld project. And I just recall how when we started this project 2.5 years ago, our first task was to look at the landscape of NbS education that was existing at that moment, and really looking back and seeing all the progress that we've made since then, and really how many NbS education communities have formed and how many new resources exist. It's really nice to say that we've come a long way. And before the project ends, we are preparing a policy recommendation report. So maybe Simone, if you can go to the next slide. This will be a report that will come out in August, and we will make sure to share it with everyone, and you can definitely find it in August on our website as well. So with this policy recommendation report, what are we trying to find out? We're really looking at how can policy support NbS education so that it is accessible more widely, so that it is delivered more effectively, which would mean that students get more sustainability competences and really don't study just superficially, but really get those competences delivered. We're looking at what changes in policy at different levels, so municipal, national, or international, need to happen, and what different policy areas need to change so that NbS education becomes reality. We're looking at what policymakers can do to support different education levels, so beginning with kindergarten and ending with lifelong learning and adult learning. So all of these questions are what we're trying to answer to see how we can promote NbS education, and hence we are also asking your help to have a discussion with us today and talk about these topics. So if we can go to the next slide. I think before we go into breakout groups, it's also probably helpful to think about what a policy initiative even is. So we define it as a strategic action or program that is introduced on a municipal, national, or an international level, in this case, the European Union, to address a specific issue or drive change. So throughout the other presentations that we heard today, we already saw very good examples of possible policy initiatives that can do this. So for example, integrating NbS into education curricula, funding research or funding scholarships to study NbS, supporting teacher training programs, or developing public-private partnerships. So these are just some examples that show how policy can help us get there. So if we go to the next slide, today we would like to invite you to join one of the 3 breakout groups, and in each of these we will discuss these questions, and we would like to hear what your experiences have been, what would personally help you promote and bring NbS education, how policy can support you personally. So we ask you to choose one of the 3 groups to join. They're split based on education levels. So group 1 will speak about early childhood education and care, primary and secondary education, and this group will be led by me. Group 2 will focus on higher education and lifelong learning, and Group 2 will be led by Neil Coles, who is a professor at the University of Dundee and is based at the UNESCO Center for Water Law, Policy and Science. And Neil has an extensive background in natural resource management and researches NbS for climate change mitigation and adaptation to promote their adoption into integrating river-based and Group 3 will focus on initial teacher education and professional development. So it will look at how do we teach teachers. And this group will be led by Iselin Molbeck, who is my colleague at PPMI. She is a research manager, and for the last 5 years, she has been primarily leading studies and projects on learning for sustainability, including 2 nature-based solutions education projects. So I would then like to ask Clotilde to split, to offer the 3 breakout groups, and then everyone can select which room they would like to join. And after the discussion, in about 50 minutes, we will all come back to the plenary session, and we will briefly discuss what we discussed in each of the breakout groups.
We have 20 minutes of wrap-up discussions for you to share the key elements of discussions, the key recommendations you came up with. And with that, I would let the floor to the first breakout group to share their insights. So I don't know who is the responsible person, the delegate, to say a few words about your reflections.
Thank you, Simone. So we had a very good discussion in our breakout room on primary, secondary, and early childhood education. So my colleague Nuria was taking notes in our session, so I will ask her to go over the main topics that we touched on.
Yes, so during our session, we were discussing how to advance NbS education beyond strictly the school level, like beyond the curriculum and administrative capacity, and also expand it into the informal education sector. So there was, for instance, a mention of the role of teacher training and how empowering educators with the knowledge, skills, and awareness to integrate nature-based solutions into their classrooms, and how this could make them more motivated, more engaged, and more inspired to share and implement NbS solutions in their classroom, and how that could lead to a sort of domino effect. And this could be an example of a bottom-up approach that can create a domino effect and inspire the students, other fellow teachers, or just the general school community. So just as an example of change coming not only from the policy level, but also having space for these bottom-up approaches to arise. Then, of course, we also discuss the role of policy in supporting NbS initiatives. So an idea was how policy can help expand NbS education beyond, for example, traditional science classes, where sometimes is where we can typically see more sustainable education taking place, and expand it also in informal learning environments. So an example of this where sport activities like extracurricular outside of school activities, youth centers or summer programs. So in these spaces, incorporating NbS education can lead to having this whole school approach where so NbS is not only relegated to a certain subject, but in the students more broad, like day to day and in many areas of their lives. We also discussed the importance on policy frameworks in providing necessary funding, updating curriculum, supporting teacher training, and how this is just essential so that change so these changes at the policy level can then support and lead to facilitating changes that maybe already motivated teachers or schools are ready to implement, but sometimes the resources are not there. Then we discussed examples from different countries and best practices that had already been implemented. We discussed, for example, countries that have small grants or local government support, and how this has worked for them. And we discussed how both top-down and bottom-up engagement from the whole actors and school community is necessary. So schools, teacher, and policymakers all need to work together for long-term and sustainable change can last. And then finally, we discussed a barrier in the perception that outdoor learning can sometimes be difficult to implement because administrative burdens and then concerns from teacher and parents, and how to overcome this. There needs to be more awareness of the benefits of nature for example, the well-being, mental health, and how necessary it is to integrate a more cross-disciplinary approach, like nature therapy, and how this can be embedded in education and classrooms. And the necessity of shifting mindsets to make sure that nature can become a co-educator, and how this is like a first step to maybe embed NbS into schools in a more like lasting and sustainable way. And maybe Eleanor, if there's anything else that could be added from our discussion.
No, I think you covered it very well. So maybe just one of the last ideas that we touched on was the role of parents, and that really stuck with me. Just how oftentimes children then end up including their own parents into if they study through NbS, so they kind of bring that back to their parents and make them be engaged, and the education happens that way around. I think that's a very lovely thought to to kind of keep in mind that it's through teaching children, we oftentimes teach everyone around them as well. But yes, thank you so much for the breakout group 1. It was a great discussion. So maybe we can pass on to breakout group 2 now, and Almut and Neil.
Sure. Yes, we discussed together with Neil higher education and lifelong learning, and we identified several difficulties in making NbS education more widely available, including, for example, overloaded curricula, funding issues, rigid structures, and the challenge of framing NbS in a way that resonates with educators and students. And the question which arose was if the difficulty is due to a lack of understanding or resistance to change. And the answer was a bit in our discussion, both, because many people are unfamiliar with the concept of NbS. It's still pretty new, and we all know that institutional change is always a bit slow. However, NbS is already being applied in many ways. We just don't always recognize or label it as such. And students are often exposed to NbS principles, particularly through sustainability or SDG education or related education. However, we need a more clearer communication and framing to ensure that NbS is explicitly recognized in curricula, and policy can play here a crucial role in supporting this shift by enabling, for example, flexibility in course structures, securing a long-term funding for projects or for NbS activities, and fostering an institutional coordination. And some concrete recommendations which emerged from our discussions was, for example, embedding NbS into institutional mission statements alongside sustainability, because often institutions often have a sustainability goal, but don't mention NbS explicitly. Then supporting flexible curricula at a national level, at least, and ideally also at an EU level. Then promoting hands-on and real-world learning approaches, leveraging also social media to engage youth and raise awareness, and strengthening the collaboration between institutions to ensure continuity and knowledge sharing after projects like, for example, NbS Edu ends. Yes, if I missed anything relevant or very important, Neil, feel free to add it.
Thanks, Almut. That's a very comprehensive summary. I think the other thing that to mention, I think you just passed over that cover, it was basically the long-term retention of knowledge and skills within institutions and within projects, particularly beyond life expectations. And I think that was something that we've all dealt with different projects, but maybe there may be an effort to have an overarching process that enables that retention across the EU that could be tapped into at any point by different institutions. So I think that's a recommendation that came back. But yes, I think the discussion was pretty good, and I'd like to thank those that participated, and thanks very much for your time today. Bernadette.
I hope you can see my screen. I wanted to show you what we were discussing in group 3. So we started with challenges, and I would say that one of the challenges that was highlighted was the lack of positive or effective narrative for NbS, especially versus technology and quick solutions. Also, we discussed some skepticism and misunderstanding of the concept, and lack of understanding and knowledge about NbS as such. And another challenge that we discussed was funding, also timing and coordination issues. But we also talked about solutions. We, of course, mentioned incentives, especially financial, but not only financial incentives, but also recognition of courses and motivation related for teachers and universities, and aligned recognition across countries, either through ECTS or another way. Then we also emphasize networking and local communities, and how actually policymakers can help organize and provide space for this at various levels, such as providing venues. But we also mentioned that there is a very important role of facilitation because people come from different backgrounds. So to overcome maybe some of the initial barriers, there is a need for a good facilitation. Then we also talked about overall communication and how to actually create a powerful narrative for NbS, highlighting positive effects and how to convince policymakers. Another solution was putting forward tailored recommendations for teachers working at primary and secondary schools, and then for teachers and academics at universities. So kind of distinguishing between universities versus regular schools. And one of the things that I would really like to highlight was exchanges, which are super important. Teachers going to different places to get inspired, to collaborate, to show practice, to actually open people's mind, to be open, to become more open towards other ways of teaching and thinking and knowing. And we also talked about some opportunities between different departments, such as life science and pedagogical departments, to actually co-create the whole process together. And lastly, I would say seeing CPD and also initial teacher education as part of the whole school approach. So if there's anything else, Iselin, you would like to share, please go ahead.
No, I think it was a good summary, but also a lot of things have been said already by other groups. So I think that the most important things were spoken about. But if there's anyone else from our group that wants to add something, then feel free.
I don't see any volunteers to add anything else. Thanks a lot for the great overview of the discussions into the 3 different breakout groups. So the policy recommendations will be published by August this year. Right, Eleonora and Iselin? Yes. Do you already know the date or not yet?
Date specifically, no, but they will be ready in August. However, before that, we will also have policy learning sessions and other maybe shorter communication on policy recommendations. So please follow the NbS EduWorld website and or other outlets such as LinkedIn, and you will be sure to see it coming in the next months.
Wonderful. Thanks, Eleonora. And then I think we are approaching to the end of this big event. So I would pass the floor to Evelina for the closing remarks. We have 5 minutes for the closing remarks, and then 5 more minutes for the next steps that will be presented by my colleague Clotilde May. Evelina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Simone. I was very happy to hear the overview of each of the different discussions that took place. And I can say this is exactly what we have been hoping for, speaking on behalf of all of us, really this exchange of opinions from different people, not just interested, but also working in nature-based solutions and education from the perspective of experts, other interested parties, organizational institutions, projects. So thank you all very much for sharing your experiences with us today. Your opinions are indeed very valuable. I'm very happy to hear that different types of approaches to address challenges and opportunities were discussed, that all forms of education were covered, and with also a particular focus on informal, which is indeed one of the 3 focus areas of the project. We are special in this way that we don't focus only on formal, but we also include non-formal and informal education in our activities and outputs, aiming towards that. I'm very happy to hear that also different types of collaboration possibilities were discussed, and really with the objective of how would this be useful to the policy aspect as well. And as mentioned, the discussions will inform first short policy summaries in the form of policy briefs or similar that we would be disseminating, and then the final very big output, which would be related to the policymakers. That would be indeed the policy recommendations. So that's why we have been gathering at this event and at the previous Nature-Based Education Summit, really hoping to hear what everyone has to say on the topic, so that that could inform our next steps. Thank you again very much for your participation. It has been great having you with us today, and stay tuned for what we have coming up in NbS Edu World. The project may be concluding, but we have 5 more months. So Clotilde, back to you to tell us what people should expect. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot, Evelina, for these words. So we come to the close of this event. So I would really like to thank again all of you who participated, our speakers, our partners who attended the event, and also, of course, all the participants having your participation, insight, and really amazing interest in this event have been really useful for us and appreciated. And I hope the discussion go forward on this. Before we part ways, I have a couple of quick requests. The first one is that we would really like to hear your feedback on this event. This will help us to improve future events that we will organize as part of NbS Edu World, and also more generally in our work. So we have prepared a really quick satisfaction survey that you can find here at this QR code, or also the link will be in the chat. So it's really precious for us to know how you appreciated both the content and the format of the event. I know there were some technical issues for this, so do let us know also what kind of issues you face, so that we can solve them also for the next event. And secondly, of course, I would warmly invite you to stay in touch and informed about our upcoming activities. There's a number of webinars that are upcoming, or the policy learning sessions that Eleonora was mentioning. So the best way to stay informed about the project is for ones to subscribe to our newsletter. You'll find it on the website and also in the chat here, the link, or follow us on social media. We are really active on all those 4 channels, mostly on LinkedIn, but also on Instagram, Facebook, and X. So do follow us if you're interested in further developments around NbS education. We regularly post about our activities or interesting publications regarding this topic. So yes, so yeah, once again, thank you for being part of this event, and we look forward to continuing this journey together. I wish you all a great day, and I hope to see you again soon.